Good evening. It's 7 o'clock. I'll ask the clerk to call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Jeff Elshoff.
Here.
Dr. Joel Schroeder.
Here.
Mr. Justin Smith.
Here.
Mr. John Welch.
Present.
Miss Diane Nguyen, I believe is absent. And you have a quorum, Mayor.
Thank you. This evening we have Pastor Gary Green from the Gospel Assembly Church in Bel Aire to lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for having us. It's always an honor to be with you. Will you please bow your heads as I pray. Our dear wise and heavenly Father, I want to give you thanks for all the blessings of life you've given us. We're especially thankful for the Thanksgiving season we just finished. We look forward now to the Christmas season, celebrating this time of year and all it means to each and every one of us. We thank you for life itself, for the health that we do have. We thank you, Father, for the ability to fulfill our callings, to sustain our work and our friendships. We thank you for the ability to be involved in this useful work for our city. And we thank you for the honor of all these responsibilities that we undertake. We thank you, Father, for the council gathered here tonight. I pray for our mayor. I pray for all the city officials of Bel Aire, and I pray for our city council. And I ask that you graciously grant them wisdom to govern. Father, these are difficult days. So we ask again for wisdom. In these difficult times, always bear in their mind the welfare and the true needs of our citizens. Keep in the forefront a thirst for justice and rightness, confidence in what will be good and fitting for our community, and above all, the ability for them to work together in harmony. We pray for peace in each of their lives and give them joy in their difficult tasks. And for our agenda tonight that's set before them, would you just guide them, assure them of what would please you, and what would benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of Bel Aire. In your most blessed name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I ask?
Moving on to determine agenda additions. Are there any agenda additions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. It contains only the minutes of the November 17th City Council meeting. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Welch.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Your first and second, is that you, Mr. Smith, or
Schroeder.
Dr. Schroeder? Thank you. Wasn't sure I was hearing. Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Discussion approval of appropriations ordinance. The expenses incurred over the last 2 weeks include several large purchases as well as capital projects. City Council chamber reconfiguration due to COVID, which I think is going to happen here in the next month or so, if that's right. New phones and PD radios accounted for $115,500, which will be reimbursed by COVID funds. That's through the CARES Act, I believe. New body cameras and vehicle equipment outfitted for the police department totaled $18,500. $180,000 went for bond and note fees. Capital projects include $270,000 for a new lift station and $85,000 for Woodlawn right-of-way cost. Any discussion? Mr. Smith.
I'll make a motion to approve appropriations ordinance 20-22.
Second.
First and second, any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. City requested appearances. We have none for this meeting, so we'll move on to citizens' concerns. City Clerk, do you have any emails to read?
We did not receive any, Mayor.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the council this evening? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to council member reports. Mr. Elsoff, would you like to begin?
I have no report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Schroeder.
I just want to report that as far as the hospitals, I'm not the greatest one to report because I don't know everything that's going on and don't have access to all the employee information and whatnot. I do work there. I know we have 130, 40, however many, something like that, COVID patients now, and we're making contingency plans to have up to 300 by the end of the year. So obviously we don't know if we're going to have 300 people in the hospital for that by January, but we are starting to make preparations for that.
Well, I'm glad you're planning for it, and I hope it never happens. Mr. Smith.
I have no report this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Welch.
No report.
Thank you. So my report is much shorter than normal. So on November 19th, I attended the CCUA meeting, and we approved some pump work repairs and insertion of a new liner on Park City well number 11. We also discussed and approved proposals for actuarial services from Lewis and Ellis of Overland Park and BT and Company of Topeka for financial auditing services. The actuarial services is being contracted as this has been a noted deficiency in the previous financial audits of the CCUA under Government Accounting Standards Board Statement 75. This deals with health insurance available to retirees. They review employee data, plan information, and claim experience. On November 19th, I also attended the Sedgwick County Association of Cities, also known as SCAT, meeting virtually. And Pat Steers of Mays presented a nice summary of recommended road maintenance programs. Pat is on the Mays City Council and sells road maintenance materials. Also, City County Commissioner Jim Howell talked about COVID issues. Most important is a survey the county is asking folks to complete regarding their interest in a COVID vaccine that may be available yet later this month. Look at the Mayor's Corner of the December issue of Bel Aire Breeze for a link to the survey. This will help Sedgwick County plan for distribution of the vaccine as soon as it is available. To my knowledge, the only vaccine so far submitted to the FDA was the Pfizer. I think Moderna did submit yesterday. So there are now 2 vaccines been submitted to the FDA. They haven't approved either one of them, but there are 2 in consideration. On November 21st, I attended the Land City auction where we were able to contract about 180 acres of city-owned land for $1.35 million. That's a very fair market value price for that land. It has no utilities currently available to it. So that's a very good deal for something that utilities are a half-mile away, so it's a good thing. At that, I'll ask our city attorney for her report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, I did receive a question from the public about signs. Of course, political sign season is over. So the code enforcement officer is going around and collecting political signs. But we have received some questions about signs that fall within an area where they may or may not be political. So the person putting the sign out might not think it's political. And if we've perceived those as political signs, there may be some confusion there. So Bel Aire is a city where signs are altogether not allowed. You have to permit into those signs. So if you want to have a sign in your yard for your business or a statement sign or some other signage, you have to request a permit from the city. The only signs that you do not have to request a permit for are political signs 45 days prior to the election. This year, council will probably look at the sign code at some point to clarify that because the law is moving in a way where if you have to read a sign at all, you're getting into First Amendment issues because you're making a judgment based on what that sign says as opposed to whether they're allowed or not. So Bel Aire has more broadly tried to say you can't have any signs at all, but the state came in and the state did say you have to allow political signs. So that might be something we have to work through, but just generally for citizens, if you do have a sign you're concerned about, just want to come to City Hall and get a permit at this point. We've had a few asking questions about that. Another kind of minor question I received was, why do council members abstain from voting? A council member has that right to abstain. They're not required to abstain unless the only place that Kansas law requires a council member to abstain is if they have a substantial interest in a business that the city is making a contract with, or if they're employed by a business that the city is making the contract with. And there's a specific definition for substantial interest. Otherwise, a council member might abstain for personal reasons if they feel like it's not ethical for them to vote on that, or if they feel like it's too close for comfort. They have the right to decide to just not vote on it. A lot of times council members will disclose that they are familiar with this business. Maybe they worked with them before, but a council member still can vote on that because that connection might not rise to the level of a substantial interest. So when people at home see council members make those decisions, they can better understand those issues. And those are just two questions I received in the past couple of weeks.
Great, thank you. Moving on to city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we've all been watching Twitter and Facebook about maybe some snow tonight, and just wanted to let you and our citizens know that Public Works is well aware of that. They're watching it. They've got their equipment ready, filled with salt and sand if they have to go out, and they work with the police department to know when streets start getting slick, and then they come out regardless of what the time is. So just be assured that they're ready in case something does happen. I wanted to remind everybody that our website has a lot of information on it, and in fact you can go there and sign up to receive notices. So for example, I'll kind of read through what the information that people can automatically receive if they sign up for this on our website. The city produces a Bel Aire Beacon, which is an online newsletter. We don't mail those out because of the cost to print them and mail them every month, but we create those. And so if you go online, you can sign up for those and they'll be emailed to you. We also you can sign up for city brush site reminders. So whenever our brush site's open, they'll send you a notice of that. You can sign up for the recreation newsletter. Those go out monthly. We have some city service alerts. So if there's a disruption of like water mains or a sewer line break, we'll send people a notice of that. So you can sign up for that. Road closures, again, if we have to close roads for any reason, we'll send out an alert for that. And then weather alerts, we work with the National Weather Service and can send out their notices. The other information that citizens can get is agendas of the city council, so they can get an agenda, a notice of when council's meeting, when the land bank meets, when the planning commission meets, when the public building commission meets, the tree board and utility advisory. So those are all the committees and the council, and people can get notice of when those are happening. So we'd encourage people, it's there. All you have to do is you can go to the website, you can sign up for all of them or just things that interest you, but they will send out notices automatically to your email. I think the alerts can also go to a text as well. So encourage people to sign up if you're interested in learning about when those things are happening. The last thing I wanted to mention is we know that Bel Aire celebrated its 40th birthday on Thanksgiving. And of course, we're having our holiday event this Saturday. I'm sure people are tired of being at home. So I want to encourage people to come out. Stay in your car. We're from 6 to 7. You can drive by City Hall. We've got the front lit up. Santa Claus will be there. There'll be some music playing. You can just wave. You know, obviously Santa won't be able to have kids on his lap and things like that, but I'm sure you could speak at a social distance from your car. And then the fireworks will start at 7. And so we're encouraging people to be, the fireworks will go off right across from City Hall. So there'll be limited parking here, but you can see it from the Northeast Magna and Isley as well. So again, we're encouraging everybody to stay in the cars, but it's kind of a fun thing to get out of the house and come and see. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Very good. I have a question. You talked about the beacon. Back issues used to be available online. Is that still true?
I don't know. I'll have to see. Now, the beacon is what we put together. You can also, everybody gets the Bel Aire Breeze, and then we put those on the website as well. So, so are you talking the beacon or the Breeze?
I'm talking the beacon. I had
Beacon?
looked in the past and it was sporadic whether or not it showed up. And
Okay.
I didn't know if we were making more of an effort now or not.
Yes, I'll check on that to see if the back issues are there or when they stop.
Very good. We'll move on to ordinance resolutions and final actions. So item A is each year the city council selects a council member to serve as council president. Jeff Elsoff is the current council president for 2020. And so council needs to select a council president for the year 2021.
Mr. Mayor, when I saw this on the agenda, I assumed I would just plan on renominating Jeff to do it again. I'm sure he's super qualified to do it. I just wanted to check, is there a culture of moving this around every year, or do we just tend to, I mean, I don't want to break with precedent and just keep giving it to Jeff if that's not what we normally do, but otherwise.
My experience is it has been, but I don't know long-term history about that.
We should also check with Jeff.
Well,
and see if he
yeah,
still
so
wants to do it.
I meant to actually ask about this before the meeting and I just forgot about it, but
Okay.
yeah, I didn't request to have myself on here.
I didn't think so.
I didn't talk about it with anybody, and I was surprised just as much as you were. I'm happy to do it, of course, but if anyone else has interest, I meant to kind of maybe, like I said, I just forgot about it. So,
Councilman Smith's the other most experienced member. Do we want to move it there for, or do we
Justin,
just
would you like to serve as council president?
I would be
next
happy
year?
to. I've also served before, and so if somebody
So I'm all about
else
rotating around. If
wanted to
if
do
you
it,
wanna
I'd be
that.
happy to nominate them as well. So
I certainly
I have
wasn't
no
intending
desire.
to.
I would tend to just have, with the two more longer serving members do it, and I don't care
Okay,
which of you wants to do it. So
I'll motion to elect Council Member Smith as council president for 2021.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second for Councilmember Smith. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0.
401, 301.
Oh, did you abstain?
I did.
Okay, sorry, I didn't give you that opportunity to tell me that. 3-0-1. Very good. Motion still carries 3-0-1. Thank you. Item B is professional services agreement for ditch drainage evaluation at Aurora Park. So the council's discussed a number of issues at Aurora Park relating to streets and drainage. After several workshops, the consensus of the council and staff is the first issue that needs to address is drainage. However, drainage should be studied in all neighborhoods that have gravel roads. Our city engineer solicited bids for drainage evaluation for all gravel streets and received 3 bids. And Ann is here to explain and study and answer any questions. Ms. Stevens.
So if you recall, we've had a couple of meetings on this topic. As the mayor mentioned, it was pretty much decided that we needed to go ahead with the drainage study for the ditches in Aurora Park to evaluate the lines, the grades, the sizes of culverts to make sure that we're adequately draining the water away from the properties and on down the road. Staff took it upon themselves because we have other gravel roads in the community, particularly over in Arthur Heights, which is the Hillcrest area. Those ditches are just as bad, if not worse, as Aurora Park. Those ditches have not been touched, whereas city staff has actually been working over in Aurora Park, doing a few ditches a year. So we did reach out to Garver, who was the low bid initially, to give us a price for evaluating the ditches in not only Aurora Park, but also Arthur Heights, the Hillcrest, i.e. the Hillcrest area, as well as Cozy Drive. The Cozy is actually in probably the best condition of the roads. There is some ditch work that does need to be done on the south end where it connects with 37th Street. So that does need to be done. Once again, we had Garver provide us with a quote for that additional work. At the last workshop where we talked about the Aurora Park, we had mentioned marking out the right-of-way, and that the engineer could have their surveyors, when they were out, set property pins so we know exactly where the right-of-way is. In working with Garver on that, there's a little bit of a problem in Aurora Park. It's a very old neighborhood, 50s vintage, and the surveyor who platted the original property just didn't do a very good job. When you plat property, you plat it in angles of the alignments as well as lengths. And then if you take all of those angles and lengths together, they should form a complete square, rectangle, whatever. They should close is the term that we use. Many of the properties over there do not close. There's gaps. So something is not correct in those alignments or the lengths. We don't know what it is, but Garver's surveyors have experience working, not necessarily in Aurora Park, but working on this gentleman's plats and subdivisions in other areas. So they're appropriately concerned about the amount of time that it would take to do that work. So they did give us a bid for it. It's actually on the back of your report, $20,400. That would be an hourly not to exceed fee. Whatever they don't use, they're not going to charge us for, but there's quite a bit of research and work involved in doing that. It would be, and then they also gave us prices for that same property survey and marking the pins on the Arthur Heights addition as well as Cozy Drive. It would be my thought and my recommendation to council that we do not pursue those property surveys at this time. We look, and they will go through when they're doing the initial survey for the drainage work, and take a metal detector out, see if they can find any property pins. If they can, awesome. They'll do a good enough job to approximate probably within a foot or so of the actual property line. It's not going to be exact. It's not something that you would want to hang your hat on in a court of law, but it would be good enough for what we would be doing. So that would be my recommendation, is just to go there and then see where we're at. If they do find some property pins, that's awesome. They can tie that property line down a little bit tighter. And if we want to pursue it later, we can. If the individual residents want to pursue it later, that's up to them. But my recommendation would be not to do that additional survey at this time, or that research and work.
At what point in time would we be required to do a survey? If we just keep a dirt road, I guess we're fine, but if we upgrade it a little bit, put a blacktop with open ditches, do we still need a survey? If we put curbs, do we need a survey? When would we be forced into that situation?
We may never be forced into it. Ideally, when those surveys occur, when you have to have property pins, or generally when property is sold, and there's sometimes the title agency wants a property survey to know exactly where those boundaries are. That is the necessary. If we're coming in and we know within a foot of where that boundary is, we're going to stay on the city side of the foot and stay a little bit tighter with our right of way. We're not going to need it. And what that really does is that tells us how far we can go out with the grading. And so how gentle we can slope those ditches. And within a foot is pretty darn close to that property line.
me expound a little bit more on the survey comments?
Sure.
Well, real quick, I'm Kinley with Garver. What she's talking about on the surveying, and your point about the streets, that probably is the time where it would be more important to actually establish property alignments. Whoever, if somebody was going to go do street design where they were going to put curb and gutter, I would recommend at that point, because especially if you have sidewalks on through streets, those are typically put right on property lines. So it would be more important here. For what we're doing with grading, generally, we're not going to be changing grading patterns. We're going to be cleaning up ditches, we're going to be calling out for deeper ditches, maybe different size pipes, but we're not going to be changing where our improvements are at the limits of the right of way. And we can certainly get close enough, we expect, without doing a full-blown survey. We'll survey in the section corners and those type of things to help us lay it in on the addition. The problem we've ran into on these plats that we're talking about from the 50s, particularly the one in particular, I'm a civil engineer. The guy who platted it was a civil engineer. Doesn't make him a good surveyor. So, but we've had a lot of problems where we have to end up resurveying everything and then prorating it out. Every lot, like if he says it's 375 feet long, but it's really 371 feet long, you then have to reprorate out every property if you're going through curves. It just becomes a lot more complicated. The truth of the matter is we picked a kind of a worst case fee because you don't want to end up being wrong. We hope that if we were to do it, it would be less. But like she said, we recommended it in the short term. Let's see what kind of control we can find on a project. If we can find enough to lay it in accurately enough to draw it in, you would only need to worry about property control more than that if we needed easements, which we're not anticipating at this time. So I hope that helps a little bit as far as that goes.
I'm just concerned that we end up with ditches like this instead of like, because we're trying to avoid the property lines.
I don't think we're going to be making that dramatic of changes where we're going to start running into really adverse situations. If we did run into that, we would have a conversation about that point of, do we need to get easement adjacent to the right of way if we ran into those kind of situations? And that's something we can certainly cover if we get to that point.
And at that point, we would be coming back to council to discuss where we're at, what we're running up against, and ask you for further direction.
Okay. I was just curious if we could stake it, and I really didn't even mean put new property pins in. When I said that, I meant just some sticks in the ground so people knew where things were. And if you can find pins and put sticks by them, that would solve my issue.
Yeah, and as far as, the ditch, being like this or like this, it really depends on kind of what kind of volume we need for the water coming through.
Right.
And what we can get. We don't want to get next to the right of way.
I was just concerned that the property line was so close to the road that you didn't have room for a ditch.
There's some areas that are closer than others, but the other issue is you've got a lot of utilities in the way. And so trying to balance those with, yes, they do have to move if we need it, but just trying to balance it with our needs versus utility needs.
Right.
And just kind of trying to balance the entire situation.
And if we find that it's kind of a narrow, can we work with the property owners and say, do you mind if we flatten this ditch by going into your yard?
We would have to get easements from the property owners, and that certainly can be worked with.
I'm curious, why would we have to have an easement? If we just say, a signed agreement, I guess maybe that is an easement, but
yes.
If they just said, yeah, fine, I'd rather you took 3 inches off here than make it so steep I can't.
Correct. And that would be, we wouldn't have to go through the full easement like we are for Woodlawn. Since it's not a federally funded project, there's a little bit more leniency in that tract. So if we just had written agreements, Jackie would be happy to, I'm sure, draw something up. And just, we would agree to like the city onto our property for 5 feet to gentle out the slope as long as the city puts things back. Okay. Something like that would be very doable.
All right.
I would be fine with that as long as that easement doesn't take a different perspective of the property, because it really goes to marketing the property, and people, new buyers don't know that, we gave them permission to take 3 inches off of that. And now I say, well, you can't do that because you didn't file an easement for it. that kind of thing. So I'd be concerned, and I know it's a situational type of thing, but I'd be very cautious about that if you get into those situations.
Sure. And that's something that if the contract with Garver is approved tonight, we'll definitely be looking at that and working closely with Ken and his team. And once they get their kind of preliminary work done, I'll sit down with Ken and he'll be back at a future meeting to discuss with the council what their findings are, what their recommendations are. And if we do run into any of those situations, we'll be back here talking to you and get your direction on how to move forward.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And I had a question, I guess, just on reconciling the numbers here. On the agenda item, the total for Garver was $41,650, $41,650. And the total lump sum fee on the table, both on page 6 of the agreement and then also on the last page on the back side, as you said, the total is $38,100. So there's a $3,550. What was that difference?
So the original scope of the services that were sent out to the 4 firms, Schwab Eaton, MKEC, and Garver, it also included the overall drainage study of Eagle Lake and Fawn Lake, as well as some improvements to the Eagle Lake Dam. And it was discussed at that last workshop that council did not want to move forward with those items. So Garver revised their proposal, which is what you see attached and then detailed on that back page. So it's a confusing, and I apologize, but that would be why the difference is there.
So are you asking the council to approve $38,100?
Correct.
Yeah, our agreement, the revised agreement would be for $38,100 on for the studies, because we deleted out the other 3 items and added 2 items back, 2 items in, so it's a little bit cheaper. So.
Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Appreciate the question.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith?
I remember our discussion on, especially around Fawn Lake, on not doing that study due to the nature of that lake. I thought I remembered, though, that we're aware of issues with the dam at Eagle Lake, and I'm not recalling why we didn't want to study that further. Can you remind me?
That was my recollection too. That's why I asked. I was surprised. I don't remember us landing on not including that.
And we can definitely add it back. I was very confused when I came out of that meeting, and I sat down. I sat down with Mr. Lasher a couple days later, as he seemed to have a pretty clear vision, and so that was kind of what we had come up with. If you guys want us to add that back in, we certainly can. I have no problem. And I'm sure Ken would appreciate the additional work.
As I recall, there was a concern about getting involved with the Corps of Engineers.
That could be.
And that's a big unknown and could be a big feat if we get involved with the Corps of Engineers on dam.
And what, if council desires, what we could do is ask Ken to go ahead and study that and come up with the designs. And then we could talk with the Corps of Engineers and see what sort of fees would be involved in it, and then come back to council, and you guys could choose whether to move forward with it or not, but we would at least have the design plans done and know what we needed to do.
And just to be clear, so this is still just for a study, right? You're saying we would have potentially a problem even just doing a study on the dam?
I don't know. We have probably
I'm going to.
For this item we were talking about, I thought was just a study. Okay.
Well, as far as going back to looking at you're talking about Eagle Lake.
Eagle Lake.
Because the study there was to evaluate the design of the lake, make sure the capacity evaluate the outflow structures on it, and then there were some low areas, some ponding area issues that were going on. Those were kind of 2 separate issues. So when you're talking about going ahead and looking at it, is it still looking at the outflow capacity, or is it more trying to cure the ponding issues? Which one were you still concerned about?
My concern was I thought I remembered us discussing that we knew Eagle Lake had a problem with the dam, that it was too low and needed built up. And so in my mind, if we know that that's a specific problem, I'd at least be interested in understanding, what it would take to get that known problem fixed. I guess I'm a little less interested in studying the whole lake and understanding its capacity and if it was built right per today's standards versus 30 years ago standards. I'm probably less interested in that, but that's just my perspective.
Well, there was a study done on that lake here just a few years ago, right?
Yes, the Caw Valley Engineering Study did identify a few areas that appeared to them to be low. And that was the dam, the second piece.
Yeah, that was the second part of it. And I'll say as a resident, I ride my bike through there, and I know that if it's been raining, the overflow, the emergency overflow area where the sidewalk's a little lower is definitely a little bit of a hazardous area to ride through on a bike, that's for sure.
Yeah, I guess through my own observations too, because I spend quite a bit of time on Eagle Lake myself. I've never noticed the actual pond like coming up. It's not like the water of the pond comes up and over, right? It's just, there's a low-lying area. It's basically on top of the dam where the sidewalk dips, and then a grass dips along next to it, and it floods because all the water in that big field collects down in there. I guess it is a low spot of the dam, but it didn't occur to me that it was like the lake overflowing in that spot. Although I suppose that may have happened before, but I've never seen it myself. I mean, I've seen it when it's flooded, but I just haven't seen it where it's like are we talking about an overflow situation?
I've never personally seen it overtop into the emergency overflow section myself. I've never seen that, but I haven't gone out there in the worst rain events either. So I've never seen it overtop myself.
And if it is an emergency, I mean, if it's intentionally designed that way,
And it is.
I guess that's important to be aware of. I don't know that everyone's maybe aware of that.
Yeah, about the only problem with it is it's old enough, and the way it was designed, the grass over time is built up, and so the sidewalk is now recessed compared to everything else. So it holds water. Just any rain event, you'll have water sitting in the sidewalk. So that's a problem in itself. And then if you look at aerial photos, there's also a couple other areas that you can tell are prone to holding water in the area where the grading it may have been just far enough away that it wasn't worth messing with or whatever. But you can see there's a couple other spots where water doesn't drain effectively out of there just looking at an aerial photo. That part, I don't think is any significant issue because I don't think we'd be altering the dam, so to speak. Getting into permitting, certainly when you get to construction, if you're trying to go to construction on it, you always do need to evaluate whether or not you do need to get permits. And part of that would be to evaluate like upstream drainage basins. Kansas changed the rules on stream obstruction or stream modifications like this, where it requires a full square mile of upstream drainage area before you have to get a state permit on some of this stuff now. Now, it is if it's a blue line on a map, it still does require a core review. I'll say right now, with the most recent changes in the waters of the United States and such, core reviews are probably more favorable and less onerous than they have been in the past. It won't surprise me if that doesn't change in the not too distant future. But right now, as far as core reviews, right now is probably the easiest it's been in the past 10 years to get those kind of reviews done without a lot of pain.
Is that something the city would have to pay for?
Yeah. Or the HOA or whoever's responsible for maintaining that pond.
Okay.
So, the city in this instance. So.
The Caw Valley study that was done, is that sufficient to identify what we need to do to fix those issues, or does that have to be further studied?
That needs to be further studied. That was a side note as far as the overall purpose of the study, which was to determine if fish could be sustained within Eagle Lake.
Right. And I guess trying to recall the workshop discussion we had, my thought was the primary concern is the flooding issue in Aurora Park. And we had talked about, well, how much does Fawn Lake contribute to that? And as I recall, it was, it contributes some in some areas, but generally it's not like the primary cause of flooding, but it could potentially contribute to it. And then so I think the question was brought up, well, how much is Eagle Lake contributing to Fawn Lake's contribution to the flooding in Aurora Park? And that was unknown. We don't know. And the Caw study didn't address that. And I think that's where we came up as a topic of should we study the drain rate flow out of Eagle Lake into Fawn Lake. I think that's, as I recall, that's what we were trying to establish to help figure out the whole drainage concern in Aurora Park. So I guess in my mind, understanding that drainage, whatever those numbers are, that data seemed a piece of the puzzle of figuring out, especially since we can't necessarily, or at least, with the Fawn Lake being a private lake, we couldn't study that as readily as we could Eagle Lake. It seems like a piece of the puzzle we need one way or the other eventually, especially if we're going to be looking at drainage. Since it's draining into that area, it would seem prudent to us to know that.
Depends on what problem you're trying to solve. If
Yeah.
you're trying to solve ditch drainage problems, most of that's probably got nothing to do with the lakes themselves, because most of that's primary structures carrying through. The side ditches are probably not significantly impacted. There might be some backwater effect. So it depends on what problem you're trying to solve there as far as that goes. I don't know if you have any history of the downstream structures from Fawn Lake overtopping the roadway. Do we have a history of that you're concerned with, or is it more just the general ditches in the neighborhood? That's one of the things and we can look at that and give some recommendations. If we see a problem, we can certainly come back to you and say, hey, this is what we're seeing, and we can certainly see if that's a problem we need to approach and not worry about it right now. Again, focus more on what issues do we have in Aurora Park and what's contributing to those, and then see if there is an outside issue that's driving it, and not necessarily get started on that today. That's fine too. It doesn't really matter to us.
I do know there are a couple roads that do get overrun with water down there, and one of them might be more of a function of trying to just keep the inlet cleared out of debris, but which is always a challenge because it's an inlet that flows directly from Fawn Lake, and it's about 2 blocks downstream from there, and plugs up. But I think Ann's very well aware of it, and it works very diligently now with her staff to keep it cleared out, especially if we're expecting rains. But it's always going to be a challenge because debris just builds up, and and you got to go clear it out.
Yeah.
So.
And obviously, anytime you have open ditch roads that are undeveloped, that you're more prone to having plugging and other issues on it. I think that just happens more often. And, in a perfect world, we just pave all these roads and be done with it. But, obviously that's a burden on the residents who live there. And if they don't want it, then, that's what you have.
I think they'd love to have it. I just don't think they want to spend the $3 million for it.
Yeah, and understandable.
Right.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Schroeder.
I can't actually remember exactly how that meeting went either, but kind of the way I'm kind of saying this as a talk me out of this kind of thing. So I'm making sense to me as far as Aurora Park and that study. And then I seems to agree that we have some issues with possibly Eagle Lake. We kind of know some. We're not super sure what they are particularly, but we know Fawn Lake ties into that. That's also sort of a problem. It sounds like we've got a couple things with our lakes, and it seems to me like tonight we could study the Aurora Park thing, and then the lakes issue is sort of a thing that we would do together. Are we going to really dig into these lakes and fix them? Because it sounds like maybe we find something with Aurora Park, it has something to do with Fawn Lake, and by just doing this very tiny little bit on Eagle Lake might not actually be sufficient to even do anything actionable. Is that, I'm not sure I'm right on that. Am I right that if we find something about Aurora or find something about Eagle Lake, it might be hard to be actionable because we don't really know the full picture of all the drainage we would need to study in that, or am I having that wrong?
So as far as the Eagle Lake and its relationship to Fawn Lake, we did discover during the Caw Valley study that Eagle Lake is basically functioning as designed. It was designed to be a fairly shallow detention pond where it holds water and releases it slowly downstream. Very common with all new subdivisions. Now, the regulations 30 years ago when Eagle Lake was built probably aren't quite the same as today. So you can't expect a lake that was built 30 years ago to function in the same way it was built today, if it was built today. So those differences, even if we studied Eagle Lake, there's not a whole lot that we can do there without major reconstruction. Because I'm assuming that it's not quite up to today's standards. Now, the other piece of the study, which is the dam, that is an actionable item that we can do. And aside from the permitting cost, probably not going to cost a whole heck of a lot of money. Very rough numbers, please don't quote me down the road. I would say probably under 50,000. So it's doable. But that would not go to fix any of the problems or perceived problems from the Aurora Park residents that they feel are coming from Eagle Lake. This would be the same problems that we hear from residents along Trib 7. You guys built all this development north of us, and all that water's is coming down our tributary, flooding out backyards, etc. So it's a similar problem with the lakes, but I think fixing and going through and at least studying the dam would give us enough information to at least solve problems, as the mayor said, and I think Justin said, that we know are existing. And so whether it's going to solve the problems in Aurora Park, I don't know. It's certainly not going to be addressing the outlet structure, which controls how much water is coming out of the lake. It will address the emergency overflow. Whether that is a benefit to the resident on the opposite side of Eagle Lake or a detriment, I don't really know until it's studied and we get actual lines and grades, and Ken can look at, okay, if we fill in this low area, where's the water going to go? Is it going to drain into Eagle Lake to be held until it's slowly released through the outlet structure? Or is it going to go into the guy's backyard? And I already know the guy's got a lot of flooding problems. He took out his pool because he was tired of getting it flooded by rainwater. And I mean, that's not something that I can answer as to why. And that's not something that Ken Study is going to be able to answer unless he does that full-blown study on Eagle Lake.
Do we know even a ballpark number what we're talking about to add that Eagle Lake portion to this study?
Do you have your old?
I didn't bring that paperwork with me today. I'm going to say it was somewhere around.
I'm not gonna hold you to it.
It was around $7,000
Okay.
for doing that.
Just for the dam part? Or for the whole
I
lake?
think
Yeah.
that the dam part was kind of between the 4 or 5, and then the study itself for Eagle Lake was probably, I think it was under 10.
Yeah.
But I can't quite remember. I believe I have a copy in my office if you want me to grab it quickly. I think I know where it is, but I and I could take 2 minutes and look, but I could, if you want to kind of move forward and put a cap on it, that would be another option too.
What's the council wish? Do you want her to go grab that study, or you want to make a decision here?
Is there a significant advantage to doing these two things together?
It would be, Garver's team could be out here at one point instead of coming out twice. But they can also get started and looking at stuff and then come out again for the other study if you wanted to look at that at your next meeting.
I would say from our perspective that if you wanted to wait until next month to take action on those other items, it's not going to have any significant impact. We can sit down and talk about it, make sure that we have the proper understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, maybe have a little bit more conversation on that. Because like the one thing I'm hearing here is there's a lot of concerns about specific yards that are being flooded, and the generic scope of the other project maybe didn't make that clear. So if we need to look at specific downstream properties, that we can talk about it, but I would rather wait until next month to act on that, to make sure that we have a good focus on it. We can certainly, the drainage ditch part of it is kind of independent enough that it won't harm anything to wait. As an aside, I did want to mention you are making one of your residents in Aurora Park very happy if you proceed with this. He called me today because he's trying to put in a new culvert in his property and said, well, we need to have you verify what elevation you need to do. And I said, well, I can charge you to do it now, or if you wait a month, I'll do it for free.
You like that idea?
Free is always good.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
Well, I think we should just kind of move forward with this as presented tonight and then talk about the potential additions and whether it makes sense to do them at the same time or not when we have a proposal for that in front of us.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the bid from Garver in the amount of $38,100 for ditch drainage study in Aurora Park, Hillcrest, and Cozy Drive, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Who is the second? Mr. Elsoff, thank you. First and second, any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Item C, the city operates a senior center that is administered by the Recreation Department. Sedgwick County has awarded $18,000 to Bel Aire that it will fund the Bel Aire Senior Center for 2021. This agreement outlines the duties of each party, and are there any questions for the staff? This is something we renew this almost every year, but certainly something we can talk about. Would you like to?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
Just a question for the city attorney. I asked Jackie some questions about some changes on page 4 that I think are in the version in front of us that are highlighted in yellow. And so I guess my question is of a technical nature in that, is this an amended contract for the motion's purposes or as presented with that language in it?
Yes, Councilmember Smith recalled that we had a special provision on the gifts. We thought that the provision was too restrictive. It was like nobody from the contractor side, which would be the city, could accept any gifts at all during the duration of the contract. So he remembered that our last contract amended that. So he went ahead and contacted the county and have amended it. It's in yellow on page 4 to change from what the county originally proposed that was in your packet, that limited gifts period, to gifts are only limited if they exceed $50. So it's more general. So yes, Mr. Smith, that would be an amended contract.
I think that's a good change. I hate not being able to give somebody a cup of coffee.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
I'll make a motion to approve the amended agreement for senior center service level 1 between Sedgwick County, Kansas, and the city of Bel Aire, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
First and second, any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Item D, city leases undeveloped ground to local farmers to help keep the property maintained, as well as bringing in funds to help recoup carrying costs. This farmer maintains empty lots in the Sunflower Commerce Park, as well as 40 acres across the street. Any questions of staff? Well, it's a good thing to do with land. It doesn't bring a lot of money, but it's at least something.
Pays the tax.
Mr. Mayor, I think we discussed this contract with the same person maybe last year. I kind of remember that. So I'm ready to move forward, and everyone else is. So I'm going to go ahead and motion to approve the farm lease with Eldon and Harris Entz and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
First and second, any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. I would like to have an executive session for 20 minutes and invite the city attorney and the city manager to join us.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
Is that for land acquisition as on the agenda? Or for a different topic?
Yes, it is land acquisition. Yes, that is correct.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to go into executive session for the sole purpose of discussing the subject of land acquisition pursuant to the KSA 754319, exception for preliminary discussions relating to the acquisition of real property, inviting the city manager and city attorney. The meeting will be for a period of 20 minutes, and the open meeting will resume in city council chambers at 8:15 p.m.
Have a motion, or do we have a second?
Second.
First and second, any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. We are in executive session for 20 minutes. You're probably ready for us to anyway, aren't you? Good. Okay, we had an executive session. No binding action was taken. We'll call the meeting back into order. Next item on the agenda is future issues. And due to holidays as well as COVID concerns, the city manager and I have discussed not holding a workshop in December. We do have a number of topics already slated for January. Everybody comfortable with doing that? Taking a week off? Okay, so.
I'm okay with that, Mr. Mayor. One suggestion I have for future discussion topic, it may be a January or February workshop, is talking a little bit about our document accessibility on our city website.
Yeah.
I would just like to visit a little bit about.
I think that's a good
Document
thing. I do know
accessibility.
there's a effort going on to redesign the website, but I do not know where that is. Yeah, but I've made some comments about that myself
I've
because it
heard
is an
some
issue.
concerns from citizens about,
Yeah.
well, gosh, these files are there, then they're gone, then they're, and so I just think we should talk about
And they're not
that.
always easy to find either, even the ones you know that are there, right? Yeah, I agree. So that is a good thing to talk about. Very good. At that, any other things to discuss? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, motion we adjourn.
Second?
First and second, any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned, 4-0.